Hello and welcome to the CX Files for June 25th, 2026. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, but not in my usual home base of Montreal today. I am back in London. Mark, great to see you from your neck of the woods originally, as somebody who was a former resident of London, the Big Smoke, as they call it. It's nice to be back and nice to be with so many friends in our CX ecosystem here.
Fantastic. You haven't been going around asking for ice creams using a Dick Van Dyke accent then?
No, I prefer not to be arrested if I could avoid it. So I've just been using my own accent, and I've not been asking for ice creams. It's been more, shall we say, beverages of the malted variety.
Well, it's so hot in the UK at the moment that you definitely need a nice cold beer, I think.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true, but it's always lovely to be back. And so many neat things happening within the scope of what's happening in the CX space in the UK. I mean, I've always maintained it's probably the most dynamic CX market that I've encountered anywhere in the world. And I'm not trying to cast aspersions against any other country, but it's such a married up industry here. The network of people, everybody seems to know one another and everybody gets along for the most part too. So it's great to be back. But I'm also very excited about the episode that we've got today, Mark, because you have a longtime friend of both of ours who you had a chance to catch up with.
Yeah. Don Berryman, who we both know from his long history working in CX. He's an advisor at Bain. He also has set up a company, an advisory company called Profectus.
Mhm.
He's the founder and MD there. And I called up Don. I mean, I know we've known him for ages, but I saw that he's just started a newsletter on LinkedIn. He's up to about episode 4 or 5 now, and it's called the CX Advisor Perspective. And he put some information on there that I thought was quite interesting because normally we talk about BPOs need to evolve, BPOs need to change. It's all about how do BPOs adapt to AI technology, and we hear this sort of argument endlessly. But Don was actually saying that enterprises also need to adapt and change, and the enterprises need to stop with their 200 question RFPs and the very dated kind of procurement focused approach we've always seen to selecting BPOs. And so he's got some great arguments there about enterprises need to change. BPOs also need to change and adapt. But what we really need to be talking about is how do we create a bridge between them in this new sort of operating environment?
Yeah, no, it's true. And if anybody's in a good position to talk about it, it's Don Berryman. Like I have known this gentleman for well over 20 years, and I've seen him navigate some of the more complex elements of the commercial side of BPO. And when he speaks, people listen, and with good reason. Don truly knows his stuff. He truly understands the evolution of how the commercial arrangements between outsourcers and the enterprise are moving. And my advice to anybody is to heed what Don has to say very, very closely because he's definitely on the cutting edge. He's a visionary, and he's somebody who I think is in a very great position to anticipate how these relationships will evolve, what the enterprises should be thinking about in terms of how they procure BPO services, but also how the BPOs respond to these shifts as well. It's one and the same, and I'm pumped to hear a little bit more about what he's going to talk about.
Yeah, and it's an interesting subject. And I think that people are just starting to talk about this because within the CX community, we're just always focused on what do the BPOs need to do and how do the BPOs need to adapt. So I think it's interesting to see this kind of pushback. I saw a Substack the other day by Matt Fry, who I met him last year when I went out to visit Foundeva in El Salvador, and Matt wrote something kind of similar to this in that the RFP process is pretty much broken because you just end up with one company asking AI create a whole list of questions for my possible supplier, and then the supplier just feeding it into AI and saying answer these
Crap,
questions. Yeah, and
such
so
crap.
the whole process is becoming broken.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the over-reliance on some of these AI tools that I think everybody's talking about, and quite frankly, now many people, I think, who are a little bit more with it are saying that it has to stop. We can't just start, we just can't keep outsourcing all aspects of business to ChatGPT or to Claude. It's not going to work. We actually have to think for ourselves for a change. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, let's go to the interview with Don to find out exactly what his conditioning would be in regards to how the RFP process needs to move forward so that everybody wins.
Hey Don, it's great to get you on the CX files. Now, you've got a newsletter that you're publishing on LinkedIn, and this is sort of themed around AI, CX, and the future of work, isn't it? So
It
I
is.
looked at, I think, the first three, and you looked at the enterprise buyers, the BPOs. You were really kind of going beyond the typical exploration of what can AI do for us, and actually looking at how it's changing the organizations. So I think, I mean, to start off with, then, in your first newsletter that you put out, you're arguing that AI is no longer just about improving contact centers. It's redefining the role of the contact center. I mean, are the enterprise buyers really thinking in this kind of macro way, or are they still just sort of bolting on AI as a series of quick wins?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's really interesting. In the research that we did last in the fourth quarter of last year, we were finding that there are two kinds of companies. I think I identified them in the first newsletter. The first one is those that are fixing broken processes, policies, procedures, customer friction, and then those that are just trying to find quick wins by adding a AI technology, but they still have the broken processes behind. So I think that most companies are still saying we want to use AI to improve our overall customer experience, but they're basing the investments on AI and those that will give them the quickest cost reductions. And so it is. I don't think they'll ever get away with saying we want to save money, but I think they're looking at it a little bit more. Most of them are looking at it a little bit more strategically.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I mean, that was exactly what I was going to ask you, because if you think about it, a lot of the advantages that people are claiming for AI is around productivity and efficiency. So you must get people saying, well, we want to roll out AI because it's going to help us reduce costs. But at the same time, then someone turns around and says, oh, well, you need to clean up your data. That's going to cost you $100,000 to do that. So,
Yeah.
so is there a sort of tension here that they need to invest to make it work strategically, but at the same time, a lot of the drivers towards this technology is around cost reduction?
Yeah, it is. I think what we found is that there's probably about 40% of the enterprise companies that are looking at it from a very strategic standpoint. They're looking at how can we fix our underlying issues with our systems and our processes by using AI and adding AI on top. And so I think the cost savings are funding AI. And some companies realize they have. I mean, they're investing with huge consultants like Accenture and Bain and others to do this work. So that's a big investment, but they're expecting huge returns from that. We've had clients come to us and say we want to save 40% of our CX cost and improve the customer experience over the next 3 years. That's a pretty big change in the operation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and if it then is enabling them to design the service in a different way, like improving personalization, reducing the unnecessary contacts, so you can apply some level of automation there. Does this change? I mean, because you're changing the customer journey effectively, does this change what an enterprise buyer should be asking the BPOs to be offering then?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think if you think about 4 or 5 years ago, the questions were how many people, what location, what's the cost? And today, what they really should be asking is which contact should disappear completely. And I think looking at it, there's a couple ways we saw. One is AI eliminating what we call easy calls or simple calls, or what I define it as unnecessary calls. like you shouldn't have waste an agent's time or the expense of saying, what's my balance, or how many days left do I have in my subscription, or this flight just got canceled. I mean, something like that should be handled easily. And as a matter of fact, I think the way the best companies are looking at it is they're looking at these are proactive ways to use AI to fix it before the customer may even know it's an issue.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, let's look at some of the stuff that you were talking about in the second newsletter, because that really focused on the BPO role and how the BPOs are changing. And I think that probably one of the biggest changes is something that we were just talking about before we hit the record button. And that is this kind of shift from pricing BPO services by headcount to pricing by outcomes. I mean, this is a big shift. It's an industry-wide change. I mean, how realistic is it that they can move from offering capacity and headcount and warehouses full of people answering calls to a more sophisticated environment where it's split between tech and people? And the people have to handle more complex inquiries. We're sort of completely changing the formula here.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt we are. And I think there'll be some BPOs that are able to do that and some that aren't. Those that are looking at the future more strategically and basing it around AI, they're willing to take that bite of losing some of their revenue, cannibalizing some of their revenue to invest in better technology, more strategic people. Because I think the structure of BPOs will change dramatically. It's not just how many people I can put in seats, but there's that thought from some BPOs like, well, I'm not going to cannibalize my current business. I'm going to, but you have to. And so, because if you don't, someone else is going to cannibalize it. And I think there are some companies who are looking at, we're going to have AI services that will be growing, which is through technology and other things. Location certainly is still important, but then there's this I want more market share. So if I'm really the best provider, then I will get more wallet share from my clients and take it away. And that's the transition that's going to happen from the providers that are looking at it more strategically than those that aren't and still want to bill on hours.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and certainly we're looking at a change in the lower end services. So, the automation of the more basic inquiries that you were talking about. But at the upper end, applying optimization of customer journey, analytics, governance, all this kind of higher end stuff. That all changes because of AI. I mean, AI is then creating the opportunity to change and improve all of this as well. So, I mean, where's the best place that the BPOs can really offer value? I mean, they're sort of having to redefine their roles. So if they're saying, here's my reason to still exist, what are the key areas?
Well, I think if you think about the AI technology reducing the unnecessary calls, as we talked about, then I think the demand then for BPOs comes in things like AI optimization, governance, workflow redesign, human plus AI orchestration. Because I think it's going to be difficult to make that move from having some agents that do very easy work and then agents that are able to do much more sophisticated work. I mean, you think you're paying a certain wage for the basic agents that you have today in whatever market, that wage rate could double because you need someone that's much more intelligent, much more experienced in the work. And so I think there's going to be that as well. And then you need to hire the support teams behind it, more like consultants versus account managers, more like engineers versus just AI or IT technicians. So I think that's going to be the transition, and those that are successful are going to start making that. Which again, that's going to have an impact on your margins for some time. And I think you have to be willing to look at it. And I think a lot of CEOs aren't willing to make that move to say, well, I'm going to spend the next year and a half or 2 years reducing my margins, but improving. I think we see that in some public companies. The analysts are looking at it and saying, oh, yeah, well, you're growing in AI, but your margins are being compressed. Yeah, well, they're being compressed because we're making that investment now to take advantage of that in the future.
Have you seen that change in any of the BPOs that you've talked to? Because I, I always think of Apple when I'm talking about this, because if you go in an Apple store, the support guys are called the Apple geniuses. They're really elevated. They're considered to be the most important people in the shop. Because they are the ones who keep the customers happy. Every time they've got a problem, it's the genius that can fix it. But that's obviously not a sort of like minimum wage job.
No.
It's someone who's got a lot of certification. They really know their products, and which kind of is the inverse of a lot of contact centers that have traditionally handled pretty basic kind of inquiries at lower wages.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a good point. I think Apple gets a premium on their products as well because they have that kind of expertise. You can walk into an Apple store and you're going to get the kind of support. I mean, they literally will take you through the process or show you how to do this but that's the premium you're paying for an Apple product as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I was saying with that shift. They're going to have to get much more expensive people on the BPO side helping because you can't have a basic account manager talking to someone in a very strategic role at a corporation that's thinking about changing their entire workflow. You have to have somebody a lot more strategic than that. So I think that's going to be that transition that they're going to have to make, and those people are harder to find, and they're going to be in demand, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think if you think about the future, there's really going to be three parts of this puzzle. I think the partner, which is the BPO in this case, the enterprise, which is the company, and then there's the whatever software technology they're going to use. What AI products, and I don't think that most BPOs are going to be housing that technology. I think it's going to be between the enterprise and the technology solution, in their data centers or in their cloud. And so the BPOs have to look at this like, okay, what are the components that I need to have to be successful? And it's much more about really strong people.
Yeah, yeah. And so then what are the kind of measures that the BPOs can start talking about? If we're moving on from that era of FTEs and charging by time, are they going to start charging for resolution or a fixed fee for each customer inquiry or CSAT? There's so many different variables you could possibly use. What seems to be the trend? What are people saying they're going to do?
Sure. I think there's a lot of talk today around outcome-based pricing, and what does that mean? It's easy in an outbound environment to talk about outcomes like per sale, right, or per resolution. I've been working with a digital company in the BPO space that has almost no employees, and right now they only handle digital transactions. So they're thinking that most organizations have somewhere between 25 and 30% of their transactions is digital. So chat, email, messaging, SMS. And so they only handle those. And it's completely AI. They take a portion of their transactions, they start handling them, and then the AI engine gets smarter and smarter and smarter. So it maybe starts off at 65% resolution. The rest go back to the customer or to the BPO. And over time, they get somewhere between 85 and 95% able to handle all of their digital transactions. And so those are the ones that go away. And that company only charges on a per resolved issue. So, that's an outcome, right? That's an outcome based solution. And so I think they're going to have to move the models to, improved resolution or, on a resolved issue, a CSAT, customer experience measurements, contact reduction, and business outcomes. I think those are the things that are going to be centered around pricing. And it's not easy, because you have this outcome based and you say, well, per resolution or per customer experience, and the BPO is working diligently to improve the customer experience. It's getting better. Then the enterprise offers some new product that completely blows that out the window and it goes negative, and then it's not the BPO's fault. So I think there's some models that need to be honed and really thought about, but it is going to be not based on FTEs or contacts handled or per minutes. That was per production minute. That's where it was going, and it's going to be completely different than that in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of tension there because it is quite a big change. How do they get started on that journey? Do you think it will be like account by account, and each account might have a different type of measurement?
Oh, and there's no doubt. I mean, what's important to one enterprise is not important to another. If you think of a travel a travel company or hospitality company, canceled reservation or a delayed flight or a canceled flight, something like that. Some of those have much more urgent requirements than somebody in an e-commerce helping them find the right product or handling a refund. So yeah, I think they will be different, but the themes are the same. What's the best outcome for the customer, and how can we do that at the lowest possible cost? And I think those are the measurements that the BPOs really need to think about, and the customers. What's important to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in your third newsletter, you talked about this idea of the bridge, which is essentially bringing the enterprise together with the BPOs and charting a course into the future together. And your argument there was that it's not going to be either enterprises or BPOs that decide what will be the future of the contact center. It's this idea of shared governance, shared technology, shared risk. So how will this bridge work? Who takes most responsibility for that relationship then?
Yeah, I think it's going to be defined by this sort of triumvirate that I was talking about with the enterprise, the software company, and because I really don't think most of the enterprises we talked to, over 60%, said they're not interested in buying a sole solution from a BPO and then being reliant on that BPO for all of their technology. That's just not going to happen. And so I think you have to think about the team in that way. And I think the future contact center is, as I said in my third newsletter, won't be a BPO managed or enterprise. It'll be co-managed, and I think you need to think about it in that relationship. And that's not easy. It's just it's a new way of operating, and I think when you think about it, there's going to be less revenue in the future because a lot of those transactions go away. But the revenue that they do get will be much stronger, much higher, and probably at better margins because of the work that they're doing. So. I think thinking about that as a team instead of a partner, client relationship is a much better way to look at the future.
Yeah, I think that co-management idea is interesting there because it implies that the enterprise is going to take a much more defined and stronger role in maybe defining the AI strategy or how the customer journey should function, and then allowing the BPO to actually just sort of manage the execution of those processes, whereas previously you'd kind of just throw everything over the fence and let the BPO manage it.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, and they should, and I think the ones that are doing it the right way, thinking about their whole journey. I mean, when we started digging in, there were a lot of. It's interesting because the reason I call this a tale of two perspectives in the three newsletters, one from enterprise, one from BPO, and then suggested a potential future state, is that BPO or enterprises are thinking of this like in the long run, 2, 3, whatever number of years, I'm going to have a lot less transactions, but I'm going to handle those much better, and they'll be much more intelligent because the unnecessary transactions will go away, either proactively or handled by a non-human interaction. But the BPOs are looking at this, and I read on LinkedIn all the time about people from BPOs writing things like, "Oh, I'm looking around my call center today, and I don't see any AI. It's only those problems that AI is causing that I'm fixing." So they don't see it today, and I understand that perspective, where they're not the ones thinking about the long term in a much smaller environment. So I think the co-managed thing works a lot for me, and I think. I think BPOs need to start thinking about things like strategy. So if you look at co-managed relationships, the enterprise will be strategy, brand experience. What do they want their customers to see when they interact with their brand, and this AI vision. And I think that's companies are thinking about today. What's our AI vision? And then BPOs will be, like you said, on the execution side, optimization, workforce transformation, to this from easy to more difficult, and this human AI orchestration. How does it work together? Because if you think about it, as AI gets smarter and smarter, it'll handle more and more, and that means less for humans. But there are a number of industries where I think it's going to take a much longer time to do that transition. You think of healthcare, that's going to be one where, do you really want to have that transaction handled by an AI agentic agent today? Maybe not. And then where it needs empathy or some sort of relationship, you want to keep that with a human being, I think.
Yeah. So what it might be technically possible, but if because you want that kind of emotional connection, you're just not going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting then, because you're saying that both sides are essentially going to change quite a lot in the next couple of years. The responsibility of the enterprise, but also how the BPO interacts with their clients. I mean, if you were in a meeting today and you were sitting with, a B2B buyer, an enterprise buyer, and a BPO, what would you be saying that they need to be thinking about, like the pathway over the next couple of years? What changes for both of them?
It's interesting because a lot depends on who's responsible for the overall customer experience, right? If you have a person that's responsible for the customer experience that's a 25-year call center veteran, they're not necessarily going to be thinking about it, because everything they've done in their past is managing agents and minutes and hours and complaints and things like that. So that depends a lot. But I think the enterprises need to stop running these AI tests, sort of the AI pilots, to try to find where I can save the most money right now, and really focus on their overall customer experience. Where's the friction? What are my systems doing? What are my policies doing? I mean, we had more customers in the past calling up about the enterprise, and the agent couldn't do anything because the policy of the company was, I'm not giving a refund over $15, and that those things are what the company needs to really start focusing on. The enterprise is thinking about, what's my overall experience? What's the best thing for the customer? How am I going to grow my customer base? And then the relationship then with the BPO changes, because they're going to be worried more about, okay, what am I left with? What's the execution? What kind of agents do I need to hire to handle those things in the future? So I think the responsibilities in those two things can definitely overlap, but I don't think the accountability can. That's the issue.
Yeah. Okay. And then, I mean, just to wrap up, sort of following on from that, and if you're just looking out over the next 2 or 3 years, what do you think will separate the winners from the losers then? Because there is a wave of change coming, and it's interesting that it affects the enterprise and the BPO. This is not just because traditionally, when everyone's talking about this in the CX community, it's all just focused on the BPO. BPOs have got to evolve. BPOs need to use AI, but you're also arguing that this changes a lot for the enterprise as well. So how can it go wrong for these companies, and who will actually succeed?
Yeah, Mark, I think we're really at an inflection point right now, because I think we're at that point where there are some enterprises already thinking about the next 3 years and how it's going to change. They got that AI vision. They're already fixing their processes and procedures before they overlap AI technology. And what's the right AI technology? So I think most organizations will have access to the same technology. When you think about it, it'll be OpenAI, or it'll be Claude or something like that in the future. So all companies will potentially have the accessibility of the same thing. So to me, the winners will be those that redesign their operating models and partnerships with their BPO, and that move to AI the fastest. So again, stop doing all these little tests with AI and look at your overall process, and then introduce that over a longer period of time. And then the BPOs will be those that learn how to partner and use that technology the fastest. And I think, again, I don't think it's wise for too much investment by the BPOs in AI technology, because in the end it's going to be whatever the client decides. And I think that, except for maybe like mid-sized or small companies that don't have access to some of that AI technology. So I think the winners won't necessarily have the best AI tools, but they will have the best AI operating model. And I think that's the way I see it. And that operating model includes the enterprise, the technology partner, and the BPO.
All right, Don, that's great. Thanks very much. We'll make sure that we've got some links to the newsletter in with all the show notes, so everybody can follow you there.
It's interesting. We have a poll added to the last one, so I'd love to get your audience's feedback on what they think about the things that we brought up in the newsletters and how they see the future.
All right, definitely. That's great. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.